Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today I'm going to be covering this book, Across the Nightingale Floor. It's book one in Tales of the Otori. I picked this up mostly because the cover looked cool, on the shelf. At Coas, it had books 1, 2, and 3, and the covers looked pretty interesting. The spine had a bit of damage, but it was still in good condition. I was just kind of looking for something I could pick up quickly, read quickly, and honestly, the thing that really convinced me to pick this up is effectively the about the author-ish portion. The author's note states, "The three books that make up the Tales of the Otori are set in an imaginary country in a feudal period. Neither the setting nor the period is intended to correspond to any true historical era, though echoes of many Japanese customs and traditions will be found, and the landscape and seasons are those of Japan. Nightingale floors are real inventions and were constructed around many residences and temples. The most famous examples can be seen in Kyoto at Nijo Castle and Chion Inn. I have used Japanese names for places, but these have little connection with real places apart from Hagi and Matsue, which are more or less in their true geographical positions. As for characters, they are all invented apart from the artist Seshu, who seemed impossible to replicate. I hope I will be forgiven by purists for the liberties I have taken. My only excuse is that this is a work of the imagination." The other books from this trilogy, and originally it seems like it was a trilogy, as that author's note implies, the other two books, the three books total that make up Tales of the Otori, it has since been expanded to, The Harsh Cry of the Heron and Heaven's Net is Wide. But Across the Nightingale Floor, the about the author-ish sections in the other ones talk about how Leanne Hearn, the author, is someone who spent some time working with Japanese theaters and spent a 6-month internship in Japan, and so a lot of that is influenced by first-hand research, but not just necessarily someone who has spent a lot of time in Japan. Half a year isn't really a lot of time, but they've done a lot of research, or necessary amounts of research, for this content. So all in all, it seemed like it was pretty interesting, this foundation for the book, and then actually reading the content is something separate. The actual plot is that the main character has been adopted into a noble clan by a wandering noble who is looking for, actually, his father. And his father, it turns out, the main character's dad, is dead. But the scene really starts with the main character's village being burned down. He was outside of the village for whatever reason, but not, in the hills. And he comes back and he sees a foreign lord looming over him on horseback and attempting to kill him. He shoves the horse is off balance. He runs away while the foreign lord is off balance, and then while running away, he is picked up by the lord who adopts him, and he looks similar to his dad enough that the lord says, "Look, really who I'm looking for." The adoption is done under the pretense of an illegitimate son who is being brought into the family as legitimate, and he looks a lot more like his mother rather than his father. Normal stuff for fantasy stories. The call to arms followed by a mentor figure. Except in this book, there's kind of 2 or 3 mentors. There's the lord that adopts the main character, but then it turns out that the main character is more perceptive and effectively is actually the descendant of a clan, in a sense, ninjas, but in a more eugenics-ish way. These clans of ninja are superhuman to significant degrees, and each of these clans seem to possess a unique ability that makes them even more superhuman, and the main character seems to have that ability in spades. And that allows him to really be picked up for training by a wandering assassin. Effectively, this mentor shows up and hides himself in a way that only another member of those clans would be able to recognize him. And so he gets training from this monk, the assassin in disguise. He also gets training on how to be noble from his adopted father. And so he's kind of juggling two different sides. He has that very samurai hierarchy, nobility, and honor, but he's also being trained for like the dishonor and assassin and the do what it takes to win mentality from the assassin teacher. And so these two mentalities are at odds, and eventually the assassin heritage catches up to him, and the main character needs to not really pick a side. He's really forced into a decision, but insists, can I help my adopted father get revenge in his honor, in his name, before I join with this training? And so his adopted father ends up dead, but he ends up doing his best to avenge that. There's also elements of a romance plot where the main character sees a young woman who is, the most beautiful person he's ever seen, yada yada yada. She is distantly related to the lady of a region whose region has traditionally been ruled by a woman and passes down through matrilineal lines. So despite her being like the niece of this lady, or like a cousin of this lady, she is this love interest is to be the next lady in charge of that land. And so through that pretense, the two characters are able to meet up. One, the lady in training, and two, the adopted son. And so these two come together, and it turns out the adopted father is the secret consort and lover to the lady of that region. And so through those trysts and secret meetups, they are able to bring their attendants or their heirs, and those heirs come along and fall in love as well. So it's really interesting. The main character is at one point figured out, and these clans, the clan he belongs to through bloodline, believes him to be a rogue, which effectively he is. And so rather than letting another clan control him or train him in secret, they want to kill him. They also want to kill his adopted father and some members of that family because of the political weight that action would carry. And so he ends up catching his clan, his kin by clan, his kin by bloodline, because they walk across that Nightingale floor, whereas he is the only person that seems to be able to walk across that floor and not cause it to creak and groan. his kin ends up being noticed, and the assassination gets interrupted, and everyone gets on high alert. I'm telling a lot of this in out of order, mostly because it's just really coming to me. It is a rant, and so this isn't going to come up in chronological order within the story. But the story follows a lot of, like, I want to say, like, weeaboo-ish plot lines, but this is also relatively early for, the weeaboo subculture to really be a thing. That isn't to say that there weren't Japanophiles in the US at the time, or even across the world, but it's kind of before weebs were really a thing in the greater cultural mindset. This book is copyright 2002. The book design is by Claire Vaccaro. The first Riverhead hardcover edition was August of 2002, and this being the first Riverhead trade paperback edition was printed in June 2003. Yeah, it seems to be a division of Penguin Group USA, so pretty cool information on the copyright page. The book is interesting. I don't think it's really good, but it's good enough for a quick read. I don't think I'm ever going to really go back to this trilogy, because it did feel very predictable at times. I do want to add that this book does have some themes and characters that fall somewhere along the LGBTQ spectrum, and primarily like gay relationships. But it's really interesting in that regard, because there's characters that really bond as men, but in a sexual way, and one in a unrequited romantic way. The main character is committed to the female love interest, but he is engages in skinship with another male character. There's hints of that in the first book, and then in the rest of the trilogy it really goes into that more, not in details, but in the way that certain actions have those repercussions throughout the rest of the story. So it is a pretty interesting trilogy. I may cover the other books if I get around to that, but for the most part, the first book in the trilogy ends with the main character being taken away to complete this assassin training. His love interest is being pulled away to be involved with a war, and I don't think they're actually, in theory, on the same side of the war, or if they are, his adopted clan is expected to be subservient to the love interest's faction, and so there's overall an interesting book, only really good enough in my mind for one or two read-throughs. I read, skimmed sections that I really did enjoy before doing this video, but as far as the books I've read go in the last year since finishing this trilogy, I've only ever really wanted to come back to it before doing this video once, and that's for doing this video. So this book, it's alright. I'm not gonna get rid of it, but it was an alright book. Anyway, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.